So everybody, welcome to the very first ever Mental Health and Spirituality Summit. I will be your host, Krista Capers. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try really hard because this is my first one ever. Welcome. Why are we here today? Well, I have a feeling that the way things are going in our society, in our country, world, maybe, people are going to start awakening more. We're going to have another wave of people looking for answers and connection and community. So I wanted this to be something that people could watch and be like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's good over there. Okay. But also bridge the gap from mental health and spirituality and how they can work together to help everybody. I'm going to start by explaining what I do. So I'm Krista Capers. I'm a certified emotion code, body code, and belief code practitioner. And I'm going to explain a little bit on how, from my vantage point, how I've seen my clients have a connection with the mental health and what I do and how it kind of helps them. So that was a lot of words that didn't quite make sense. The beads were out of line, but it's fine. You got all the words, you're good. So whenever I'm in session with somebody, what I do is I find trapped emotions that are left over from the past, or maybe not so past, maybe like last week. And they're energies that you have not processed, things that you kind of just boxed away and like, I'll figure that out later. Well, later comes and you're like, what's that box? I have no idea what's in it. We're just going to leave it there because I don't know what it is. It might be scary. I'm not sure. And then life goes on and you might get to a point where, where somebody might have experienced something that doesn't quite, they don't remember what has happened, but they're feeling this emotion and they don't know why. So I will go in, I will find this emotion, I'll identify when it happened and some details pertaining to what happened. I can identify the age that you were, sometimes the people or the place that were involved. And then a lot of times memories will start coming back. And it's quite interesting whenever that happens because in sessions too, if I have a topic, for instance, somebody came to me regarding changes in their career. And they were feeling a lot of, let's see, it was vulnerability and worthlessness. And that was the only topic that we focused on. Everything though came out as being in that range of frequency, emotion wise, but everything was like early 20s. And something really big happened in that client's life at that time. And it started to make a lot of sense. And even though it was something regarding career, it was actually her father that was the issue at that time. And it was male driven versus just colleague driven. And so it helps you connect the dots. So she was able to take that information and go to a psychologist or a therapist. And she really was able to kind of rewire her brain on why she felt the way she felt now. Because whenever we have things that are unprocessed from the past, they tend to light up. So if you're feeling a sense of insecurity right now, insecurity from whenever you were 3 years old might be lighting up as well. And so they all start to talk to each other and they can kind of get unruly and manifest into not so good things. So that's one way that I can help with kind of bridging the gap between mental health and energetic healing. And well, what does energetic healing and spirituality have to do with each other exactly? Well, energetic healing does not work without belief in the self. You have to believe in yourself, and that is part of spirituality. You have to know that you have the power. I love it whenever people say, oh, it's the placebo effect. Isn't the placebo effect the most powerful form of healing, though? If you're able to give a patient a sugar pill and they think it's something that's going to cure cancer, and then the cancer shrinks, how is that not the most powerful form of medicine that we have? It's within us. We have that power. And the same thing goes with mental health. Whenever I first met with Rebecca, the ghost guide, I was in a spiral moment. I didn't know what was up or down or side to side. And I was seeing a psychologist at that time, but they did not give me enough perspective. Rebecca reminded me of how to ground so I could stop spinning, and that I had the ability. I was the problem, but I was also the solution for myself. And so spirituality is extremely important in my opinion. And you can't really have healthy mental health without some form of spirituality and self-worth and self-power, and understanding that you are part of something way bigger than just yourself, but that bigness out there is also within. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Rebecca. That was part of my little speech. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the belief code and how to grow a new belief system. But first, we're going to hear from Rebecca, the ghost guide.
Thank you. And I have to hand it to Krista for wanting to do this and going outside of your comfort zone, and just how much you want to give back to people and how much you want to help other people. You have been an inspiration for me, and I love how kind of a basic hit or miss conversation we've had over months turned into you saying, okay, I'm going to host this thing. And you arranged for all of these people to be here. And I'm so excited to hear what everybody has to say. And I just also want to say, Krista, I am so proud of you. I am so proud of seeing you grow over these years, and especially the amazing work that you've been doing as a practitioner, not only for me, because yes, y'all, I go and see Krista for various things having to do with various different kinds of codes, even sometimes just personal life code. And I am always blown away by your talent and your patience and your grace. And I know I'm not the only one. So thank you very much, Krista, for arranging this.
You're very welcome. And thank you for everything too. Oh,
Likewise.
and really quickly, if you have any questions for anybody, please put them in the chat, and Caitlin's going to get the good ones. And I mean, not whatever. She'll make sure that there's no duplicate questions and stuff. And we'll take questions at the very end.
Perfect. Thank you for making that. That was an important thing to say, I think.
Yeah.
So thank you. All right. Well, hello, everybody. I am Rebecca Carmichael. I am also known as Rebecca the Ghost Guide to the internet. And one of the key phrases that I've been using most recently is I help people understand the ghost around them and within them. And that is going to be the subject of what we're talking about today. I have always had a passion for understanding mental health. It was mental health that gave me back my power. And it was mental health that also allowed me to become the psychic that I am today. In only a few short years have I actually become more confident calling myself a psychic, calling myself a medium, and actually doing that publicly. And I can do that now because of the work that I've put into my mental health to better understand myself and understand who I am, and that I can be me, and that can be beautiful. And I don't have to put on airs or be this idea of whatever medium means or whatever psychic means or anything like that. So I'm very excited to be a part of this panel. And as far as ghosts go, I get a common question regarding what is a ghost. And my definition of that has changed over the years. And as a neurodivergent person, I have taken a huge, long definition over the years, and I have shrank it back down. So at first it was kind of an understanding, and then it was way too much understanding that went over most people's heads. And now it's back down to a small phrase. The small phrase is: ghosts are a fragment of a soul that has stayed behind in order for them to find some kind of resolution to eventually move on. And here's an important distinction here. Due to mass media, there's this thing going around, it's been around for years now, where it's like a psychic medium's job to move a spirit on. No, absolutely not. Psychic mediums can assist somebody the same way that we assist one another in simply feeling seen. So if I'm going to, quote, move somebody on, it's oftentimes by acknowledging their fears, acknowledging their concerns, reminding them that they're a person, that they have value, that they have worth simply on their own, and they deserve time and space where they can simply be. Sometimes that's going to a past memory, and sometimes that's moving on to a concept of the afterlife. It is entirely up to them and their comfort level. There is no moving on without that person's choice being a part of the matter. So back to what makes a ghost. Basically, so often a full soul moves on, after they pass. They may go to an afterlife, they may go to an in-between space, they may become an ancestral guide, they may become an animal, they may become a variety of different things between this world and the next. And then there's the parts of them that they haven't quite worked on. These parts may choose to stay back because of fears. Let's say they're concerned about what's going to happen to their house, what's going to happen to their favorite things. Even something like what's going to happen to their favorite chair can sometimes keep a fragment of somebody back. Other things, we do see ghosts that stay back due to a larger tragedy. Perhaps they were not expecting to pass when they did. They feel a great obligation to look over their family, or maybe look over their pets or the things that they care about. And sometimes, certainly, we do see ghosts that stay back because they perhaps died at war and they're still grappling with how they passed away and how tragic that was for them. Some ghosts really just like wake up on the other side. And remember, these are fragments of a self. They wake up on the other side and they're like, oh, I know what happened. And then they look down and then there's some residue of it still there. Remember, that's the fragment. It's the part of them that really didn't want to go, the part of them that was not ready to do the work. Now, what is the work in this case? The work is making peace with what did and what did not happen when one is alive. I do have genuine concerns for the next wave of people that we are going to see enter spirit simply from old age, because a lot of the older generations were not taught to give themselves space. They came into this as a place of fear. They have to have a lot of stuff. They have to have a legacy. They have to have their children love them. They have to have their name on a building. They have to have. And because of that, so on a mass scale, I would say, and especially in Western nations, especially in the United States, a lot of these older people were not provided space and time for themselves to simply be. It was very much a go, go, go. And there's also a huge fear having to do with the afterlife based upon some major religions that are creating that fear for people. With ghosts, I do talk to some people who are genuinely concerned to move on because they don't want to go to this concept of hell. They don't want to go to, quote, the bad place. And so they think it's better to just hang out. And these are people, I've seen people different races. I've seen people different ages. Certainly sexual orientation is a huge part of this as well. Maybe people who were always told they were bad for some reason because they were poor or they were in debt. Anybody who is living in some kind of great shame brought upon something that is unresolved, is that fragment that stays behind. And so really, while I am known as Rebecca the Ghost Guide and I want to talk to ghosts and I want to understand them, I also want to be a part of something that encourages people to give people the time and space while they're still alive, so that they don't feel that shame, that concern, that fear that keeps them here. So it's kind of an ironic thing that I'm like, I love talking to ghosts. I also want to be a part of the movement that creates less ghosts. And I truly believe that the thing that will create less ghosts moving forward will be mental health. It's simply giving oneself space to exist and to feel like they are enough simply as they are. So that is why I am so grateful to have a community like this where we can talk about the spirituality, but we can also talk about why is there that spirituality? Why are there ghosts in the first place? Why is there spirit that seems unresolved? Places that have terrible energy or even wonderful energy. So yeah, I'm so glad that we're having these discussions on mental health. So thank you for hosting this.
Hold on. Ready? So that's the cheesiness that I was talking about. I think it's great because you can't hear everybody clapping, and it's an applause. But yes, if you of course don't know how to get a hold of Rebecca, here's her website. And you can join Patreon if you're not already on there. But thank you very much, Rebecca. Okay, up next, Katie Junovic. Katie is a licensed therapist in New York, and she's going to talk about how her intuition helps her with her clients.
Did I unmute successfully? I did.
Yes.
I see it. Okay. You were talking about singing earlier, and I said, "Oh, don't worry, Krista. I wore my Stevie Nicks sweatshirt," and then wondered why nobody heard me. And I'm on my gaming headset, of which I did not realize that I was muted. So now I'm not. So yeah, thank you. I'm a licensed master social worker, um, and currently working towards my clinical. So if anybody is ever familiar with anything New York State, it is a gauntlet to get to next level of things. So I'm almost there. It takes about 2,000 hours postgraduate program and lots of clinical stuff. So I'm actively working on that. I also, by day, I'm a school social worker as well. So many of you, if you have been in our chats, I'm Louise Katie or Katie Louise, depending on the identity of the day. So sitting and listening to Rebecca, I started to cry a little bit over here because I think finding community is really the reason why we're all here today, right? Like there is such this unique thought process of believing in the fact that energies exist and the energies around us are for that simple adage and cliche of unfinished business. And I had always thought about, as I sit with my clients, who is surrounding them without asking them, because a few of them are not open to spirituality just yet, but really looking at who is around them that's supporting them or holding them down. And I often think about Muppet Christmas Carol just because of Marley and Marley holding Scrooge down. And that's kind of what I see around sometimes my clients, and really looking at my spirituality as to how that was able to help me. Because also, as being the practitioner, you have to protect your own energy as well. We go through so much work in the master's program of looking at, your implicit biases. And I think one of the questions that really shook me to my core in one of my first interventions classes was, which clients would you not be willing to work with? And I didn't have an answer to that because I felt like we all needed that collective healing. And how important it is, especially when you're looking for a therapist, to know that those of us who have put in that work to push away all of those biased thoughts and opinions, to know that as a collective human race, we all deserve that dignity of mental health help, that there are those of us who have worked very heavily on that as well. I think that that's why it goes very in hand with emotion coding. There is so much cerebral work that is involved in a therapy session, and word to the wise, your therapist should be continually checking in with you, just like if it's any sort of physical massage or therapeutic massage, we're massaging your brain during that session. So drink lots of water and make sure you get lots of sleep, and at the same time make sure you're communicating with somebody, so that that very much like dating, you just got to let that person know they're getting to know you. So a little bit more back to intuition and really protecting my own energy, because the energy that I'm going to put out into a session is also going to reciprocate back. I also note patterns of who is reaching out, who is connecting more with my profile, and what does that mean as a collective whole as to what that certain audience is seeking, right? Because the other interesting part of being a social worker is we look at systems theory, and who is supporting whom or who is not supporting whom. So hearing Rebecca speak with such empowerment about what does this look like moving forward, for helping those that are currently present on this plane not have that unfinished business when they move along is really important to me, because I see it especially as we explore with generational trauma, because also, and I believe in EMDR and other scientific evidence-based practices, but I think a lot of it leaves a little bit more scars if we don't look at the spirituality and talk to people about balance, about what rewiring looks like, what does that base work look like, and why. Because we could put all of that work in, but if there's existential dread and recent energies not really being able to be explained, then you're just doing a whole lot of harm and not really helping with that rebalance. So I will most definitely echo the sentiments of a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy that I love to work with, a lot of healing and grounding. And grounding looks so different from any sort of moving meditations, and love engaging in Reiki and practices and seeing where energies shift within people. But I think that at the end of the day is being able to just be in tune with clients and looking at really grounding myself and seeing who's around them. And my spirit guides really allowing me to connect with whoever is around them as well. And also, lastly, not just focusing primarily on the past and where things went wrong, but what is that purpose? Why is that affecting that person now? And not just what happened to that person. Because I think some of the most destructive language has been what is wrong with us versus what is actually effective, and what has happened to our story. So lastly, using intuition to help a lot of people write that next chapter so they can string along some beautiful poetry to reset. So that's all I got, Krista.
Thank you so much. Ready? And if you happen to be lucky enough to be in the state of New York and you'd like to hire, or I guess it'd be hire, Katie as your therapist, you can reach her at her email here on the screen. Okay, up next, we have Marlene Call. And Marlene is kind of a superhero. She's all the things that you could possibly be. Okay. You see all those numbers, see the alphabet behind her name. There you go. So take it away, Marlene.
Oh, hello, I am Marlene. I do have a little bit of an alphabet going on, and my background, just if you will, I've been a nurse for 17 years, and I started out in pediatric oncology. For the last 8 years, I've been formally trained in doing energy work, but I started doing it as a child intuitively. And so my kind of goal for you all today in my very short amount of time is for us to look at the intersectionality between mental health and energy and physical health, because it also all comes together. And I have found a lot of work, not just in nursing, but in energy work, and when it's all started coming together, how deeply connected everything is. And a lot of our unresolved physical ailments can have roots in emotional or traumatic or energetic imbalances. So some of the things I've seen when I've been working on folks for different energy issues is I end up getting people oftentimes not because they believe in energy work, but because they're absolutely desperate. There's nothing else has worked. And so they end up coming to me, and I end up working with them. And what I did not know was happening before, but do now, is I would do energy work on someone and I would get messages or words that would pop into my head. And it really aligns with a lot of the work that you can find by different authors. Like there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score that's excellent. But when we have physical ailments that are kind of persisting despite all of the treatments we've done, so everything else looks like it should be lining up, there's often some sort of emotional, mental health, or energetic component sort of at play. And we kind of shift the conversation, kind of what Katie was just saying, as we start asking, what is the body trying to tell us? Because there's usually a message there. And then if we stop and pause and figure out what is the body trying to tell us, we can get to the root of that, whether it be spiritual or emotional, and actually move towards healing. So trauma is not just an emotional experience. It affects the entire system, including our energy flow. And that's where I come into play a lot of times with my energy work, is I can kind of detect that, and then I start asking questions, and we go from there. On that note, there's a book by Louise Hay called You Can Heal Your Life. And one of the things that she presents that I like from what she talks about is how physical ailments can often reflect sort of emotional conflicts, and that helps give us an insight of how we can look at things. And in her book, she has a whole list of like different ailments or body parts and what they could be associated with. And I find these as tools that you could use to explore, and not hard and fast rules that if you break your finger, it doesn't mean this particular thing. So I use them as kind of a jumping off point to explore deeper layers of healing there. I also really like science, and I nerd out a lot. So when we talk about energy work, we're coming from the field of quantum biology, right? Quantum healing. And if you like quantum physics, it's a really cool world. And they're coming out with new stuff all the time, like quantum entanglement's a new thing people are starting to like vibe about. But a couple of the things that I've read about before and that make more sense to me now are things like psychoneuroimmunology. So like our mind, body, immune system connections there. And what this tells us is that traumas, big T or little t, don't just affect the mind. They leave sort of like fingerprints on the body. And chronic stress or unresolved trauma, all these can activate different parts of our system. So there's a hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So it's very complicated to say. It activates things that can cause issues. And what it does is it can move us into the state of like high alert, high vigilance, like sort of chronic anxiety, stress kind of stuff. And over time, this can end up with giving us like body inflammations and weaken our immune systems and cause physical illness. And so again, moving through these practices and trying to find ways to address and look at the mental health components can help us with our physical issues. Anytime someone has a physical ailment or condition, I'm like, ooh, there could be something else here. I also love neuroplasticity, so our brain's ability to like boop, boop, change stuff, right? So when we look at healing from trauma creates neural pathways that are sort of reinforcing the fear and the hypervigilance, and the negative pathway can like cause bad roads form. And one of the things that we can do with energy work and healing and things like EMDR and mindfulness is kind of help rewire that. I adore EMDR, and I've done EMDR with spirit and with ancestral trauma. So I've had past life trauma and ancestral trauma that I was working through, and I was doing it for myself just fine, and then it kept kind of creeping back. And we were able to add EMDR in spirit and do it that way, which was super cool and amazing. But when we do energy work that enhances emotional awareness and sort of creates a space for the brain to form healthier connections, we can start moving our body towards more healing as well. So energy balancing can help us show where our blockages are, or the connections to the physical or emotional patterns that are sitting out there. And then we can kind of support the body's like natural process in addressing emotional imprints, those little fingerprints we talked about before. I don't know how much time I have left, so I'm going to wrap up really quickly. I love where science is going right now, because I don't know how much everybody reads the cool science out there, but we're moving there slowly, but we're moving there to start being able to measure and see some of these bigger energetic concepts. And we're seeing more science supporting that trauma and these other things are like whole body impacts. So vagus nerve, cortisol regulation, gene expression. There's impacts on genes that are also fascinating. I think it's dealing with the gene expression when we experience certain trauma. So we have adverse childhood experiences scales and things like that. And they can sort of turn genes on that maybe wouldn't have otherwise kind of clicked on, which is where we can see some of those other things going on. And we have the opportunity with energy work combined with therapy and taking care of your mental health and spirituality to like heal these things and move us back to a state of wholeness. I like the combination of modern medicine with mental health, with energy work to create the holistic picture of healing. My goal here is more just our bodies hold a lot of wisdom, and I want us to remember that when we start addressing physical, emotional, and energetic layers together, we can reach this profound transformation towards wholeness and well-being. So whether it's energy work or therapy or just asking new questions, healing starts beginning when we start really just listening to our bodies and what our bodies are trying to tell us, and then making a movement towards that. So there, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Marlene. You are a magical human, and we do a lot of the same things, but in very different ways. And I love the fact that there is no right way and no, I mean, there might be some wrong ways, but there's no like one way of doing energy healing. I mean, there's people that do it naturally. There's people that need a little bit of like direction. And I needed a program that had things in a very, you know, like list kind of way. So it's just so cool to see how other people do things, but it's like we all kind of end up in the same, like, oh yeah, that's so cool, I do that too. So yeah, thank you so much. And if anybody would like to book with Marlene, her website is here, and I would highly recommend. So let's see, I think, am I next again? I am. Okay. Yes. So for this, I'm just going to go over what a belief system is. And I'm going to offer some kind of worksheets. And to get those, you can go to my website and then or to my group. They're in my Facebook group. I know that Facebook is a little bit, we have some feelings about Facebook right now, but it's just where we are right now. And the files are under the file thing in my group. And to get to my group, you can go through my website and there's a little icon to join that if you are not already in there. So reclaiming a belief system. This is one of the worksheets that are in the 2 files that I found. This is not mine. I found this from joinmentallyfit.com. The internet is lovely. The internet has lots of resources for you out there. And in this situation, what they explain is basically to document how you're feeling and document the emotions that you're feeling. And at the end of the week, you can, or end of the writing activity, you might be able to sum up what you're actually feeling into a smaller little nugget of words. And so, for instance, here it says, I am not good enough. That's a very common one that I find. But the way that these come out, so these are the notes from a belief system that I took away from myself, self-esteem. There's probably more, but we'll get to that. Whenever I'm disassembling a belief system, I always start with the top of the system and then I work my way down to uncover it. But then whenever we are going to release everything, we actually release the leaves of the belief system before we start with the basic, like all the other things. Belief systems, they have a lot of things that are, it's like an onion. There's a core and there's many, many layers on the outside. So a lot of times I hear about, people talk about how your limiting beliefs, that's only part of it. The limiting beliefs are the trunk of the tree. So what's feeding the limiting beliefs though? There's something underneath it that is kind of feeding everything else. And if you don't eradicate that core, the root system perhaps, or even the dirt that's feeding the roots, then that can it can come back and it will kind of regenerate in some way. So either whether you do it with me or not, because I can help with uncovering these belief systems. They're kind of intense, I won't lie, because it's you're using every part of the emotion code process. You're using belief system, body code, and the emotion code. And so that it can take a little bit of time and it can be a lot, but it's very profound because you're all of a sudden, it's like there's this little radio that's in the back of your head that just shuts off and you're able to just kind of think freely and create your own. So this is a little worksheet that I made. Once you have uncovered the negative parts of a belief system for yourself, then you can start to grow your own. And I would say start from the bottom up. Plant the seed first. What do you want to have as your core identity? It could be I am loved. That's it. I am loved, or I love and I am loved. That can be like the core. And then what could feed that? I am a good person. And then what could feed that? People respect me. I am taken seriously. It could be a lot of different things. And by all means, write it in pencil. So that way, if you need to move something up or down, you can. If you want to change it, you can. That is kind of the magical part of having a little bit of control over creating a belief system consciously is, oh, that one's not serving me. That part is not serving me well. I'm going to get rid of that one and I'm going to replace it with this one because it has so much more sparkle. So this little form here can be found on my group in the files. And now I made my own slide. Here's my website. So you can find me at lifeatlashealing.com. But up next, we have Rebecca Jane. And don't worry, I know Rebecca Jane is very, very busy. Rebecca Jane, she's a psychic medium, spiritual growth leader, founder of the Temple of Chaos, but also our beloved weirdo. She is self-proclaimed weirdo, and we love her. She could not be here physically because Rebecca Jane is moving out of Texas right now. So I want everybody to take 10 seconds, and I want you to kind of make some energy, and I want you to just be like, send it off to Rebecca Jane right now, because Rebecca Jane probably needs that. So we love her, and I'm so glad that she's going to be on the road, hopefully tomorrow. Okay, so we have this lovely video.
I am so honored and excited to make this video for you today because it is one of my favorite topics. This is a topic that I talk and I preach and I harp on all of the time because this is the one thing. If I could give you one thing that I could guarantee would change your life, it would be this. That one thing is self-love. And I know it sounds cheesy. It sounds cliche. It sounds crazy. It sounds too easy, right? But it's not. It's one of the hardest things that I have ever had to work on. And it's really hard because we don't often have a good understanding of what self-love really is supposed to look like, right? We don't really know what it is, especially in the United States, because we have this hustle culture. We have this grind culture. We don't have this take care of yourself culture. And so the concept of self-love is something that I think is really foreign to most of us. And so because we don't really have a great media example of what self-love looks like, we try to figure it out, and we confuse it. We confuse it for having a really big ego and just always getting what you want or speaking really loud. We confuse self-love for all of these other things because it really is such a foreign concept to us sometimes. But the thing is that's not what it looked like at all to me. And for a really long time, I didn't know what to do with that. And, at first you think, okay, well, self-love, kind of like self-care, I'm taking bubble baths and I'm relaxing and I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing the self-care things because I do want to love myself. But do I really love myself? What does that look like? Because self-care didn't feel like love. Self-care felt like bare minimum. Self-care felt like empty hopes and dreams. And that's not what self-love feels like. I was so confused. And of course, self-love is going to look a little bit different for everybody. But for me, I truly started to understand it when I started to look at my actions that I maybe wasn't the happiest about. True self-love and true self-understanding didn't come until I really started to look at the actions that I did not want to remember. The ones that you reacted too big, or in my case, I wish I reacted bigger. In many situations, I wish I spoke up. I wish I was loud. And in looking at those situations, and I say, why didn't I just do that? I'm so stupid. Why didn't I just speak up? Why didn't I just say that? I know now that I was able to speak up, that I could have spoken up physically. Yeah, I understand that. Physically, I could have said whatever I wanted. But true self-love came in understanding why I didn't. It wasn't until I looked at those shadow parts, those parts of my past, of my history, of myself that I don't want to look at, those parts that I push into the shadows. It wasn't until I started to look at them, and I looked at them with my human adult brain, the brain that I have right now, not the brain that I had in the situation, not the lymphatic responses, not the nervous responses, not the fight or flight responses that I had in that situation. I look at myself now and I say, wow, you survived that. And I don't say, wow, you didn't speak up. You could have spoken up. You could have done anything. I say, wow, you survived that. And as you can see, loving yourself is a process. It is something that you learn to do and you invest in and you develop for your entire life. You learn about yourself. You learn about why you made the decisions you made, who you are as a person, as a human, as a spiritual being, as a soul, the community that surrounds you, that energy that you draw in. Loving yourself is opening up a completely different world that you never knew existed before. And it is life-changing. I promise you that.
Thank you, Rebecca Jane. I hope that you watch this at some point. But if you don't already follow Rebecca Jane on Patreon, she is Bruhabones on Patreon. I highly recommend, especially with everything that's happening with TikTok ban and stuff. Don't lose her. You can follow her there. And up next, class, we have some science to discuss. Ashley Gusakuma is a teacher and of many things. And she's going to talk about the science and spiritual impact of anger and fear.
Oh my goodness, it's my turn to do the thing.
Your turn, yay!
But I'll have to follow that with a science lesson.
I'm ready for it, though. I'm ready.
All right.
I'm
That's awesome. So my job is basically to talk to you guys about like the dance of anger and fear and what that dance actually does to our minds, our body, and our spirituality. Marlene actually covered or started to cover some of the stuff that I'm going to be covering. So I'm going to kind of back her up a little bit here. So I'm really going to be focusing in on three chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, and dopamine, that are all present anytime your body experiences anger or fear, because they're actually sort of parts of the same structures of our brain. And so, as you guys probably know, anger and fear, they're all like, they're not inherently evil at all. They're part of our survival mechanism. It's rooted in our biology. It's part of why the human race survived. Anytime that we feel threatened, our amygdala, which is like the small, weird little ball structure in our brain, will activate, and it activates our fight or flight. And basically, that will trigger your hypothalamus to just start dumping these stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. And this is preparing your body for action. It'll increase your heart rate, it'll dilate your airways, it'll redirect your blood. Basically, it's going to shut down anything that's non-essential and pour everything into those like life-saving, like I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger kind of situations. Cortisol in particular will actually up your blood sugar level. It actually tells your liver to just start pouring glucose into your bloodstream so that you have that extra sugar. It starts breaking down muscle again for extra energy. It'll suppress your immune system because you don't need to fight off diseases if you're about to be eaten by saber-toothed tigers. So that's a complete waste of energy. It'll up your blood pressure because more blood is more oxygen and faster muscle. And it actually redistributes your fat, and it results in a fat accumulation around the abdomen, especially for females. So yay. In your brain, small doses of cortisol can actually help you increase your memory, especially for any emotionally charged memory event. However, cortisol impairs the hippocampus, which means any non-emotionally charged memory event, like your common everyday memory, starts to get impaired. Your attention, your decision making, your reasoning, you basically experience this cognitive decline. And with overall or repeated doses of cortisol, your mood regulation just goes to crap. You have mood swings, you become super irritable, you experience depression, And so long-term exposure to cortisol basically equals health problems, metabolic issues, cardiovascular disease, and mental health concerns. Adrenaline, which was the other stress hormone I had mentioned, its job is to, again, up your heart rate, up your blood pressure, make you alert, regulate or redirect the blood flow to all of your major muscles and organs, up your respiration, again, release glucose from your liver so that you have energy to fight off the saber-toothed tiger that's about to chase you down and eat you. In the short term, it can enhance your awareness. It can help you make quick decisions, sharpen your senses, like your vision and your hearing. But long-term and frequent exposure to adrenaline results in heart disease, anxiety, mental health problems. I mean, for example, if we're up in our blood pressure all the time, that's a lot for the heart to take on. And so it results in heart issues. If we're shutting down our digestion all the time, because that's considered a non-essential function, then that can actually lead to stuff like irritable bowel syndrome. If we're upping our alertness all the time, we're going to have sleep issues and we're going to have weaker immune systems. And so we're going to get sick more often. So it's kind of all in moderation when we're talking about this. Anger specifically often involves activity in your prefrontal cortex, and that results in heightened dopamine levels, and that's probably a chemical I don't have to go into too much detail for. I didn't write anything out for that. Most people know dopamine is feel good. Okay. And when you feel good, you get this sense of power and righteousness. And fear, on the other hand, is going to activate your alarm system, which will bypass rational thought and kind of make you think about more immediate survival. And as I said, chronic activation of either of these symptoms is not a good thing. We're talking, it'll break down the body, it breaks down the mind. It's just not great. So that was kind of the basics of the chemistry lesson, so that you guys know the chemicals as I kind of talk about them through the remainder of my little talk here. But when we're talking about our modern society, it probably doesn't surprise anyone here to find that every journal I found says, yeah, we're seeing chronic anger and fear, and it is on the rise. It's often fueled by sensationalized media, political polarization, social instability. I mean, look at what's happening on TikTok today. That's all you got to do. And it's basically overall, as a society, we're just seeing increased rates of anxiety and depression. What you may not be aware of is the addictive nature of fear and anger. Because it does come with that surge of dopamine that I was talking about, human neurobiology is actually designed to reward anger and fear. In the heat of the moment, anger can feel really good and satisfying. Like I said before, it kind of bypasses our moral reasoning, our rational controls. It comes from the limbic system. It's very primal. And it does come with that dose of adrenaline, just like gambling, extreme sports, anything that comes with that dose of adrenaline is going to want you to kind of seek it out again. Being the nerdy scientist that I am, I actually found a research study done in 1996 on rats that actually showed that when they had one rat attack another, the aggressive rat showed a dopamine increase of 30 to 40% in the brain by becoming angry and aggressive. But what I didn't get, or at first it just blew my mind, is that the rat that was threatened, the one that was afraid, showed double that dopamine increase. That's why things like roller coasters and, getting the crap scared out of you, haunted houses, that sort of thing is so addicting, because it comes with double the dopamine, dose that you would get if you were just, angry, so to speak. Psychologically, fear and anger basically feeds ego frailty. It's kind of a way to hide weakness and insecurity and give you a temporary sense of power because you're not scared, you're angry, and it's also a way to avoid emotions. So all the therapists in the room can kind of back me up. It's some individuals who come from chaotic environments. Anger is just kind of an area where they're comfortable. And so it kind of works really well in that way as far as becoming addictive. Now, the role of social media is currently playing in our society is really contributing to this. And our algorithms that we have are actually designed to kind of prioritize making sure you get things that you're looking at. And since these are addictive kind of clickbait items on social media, it will feed you what you want, which basically results in further polarization. If you guys know anything about groups that get together, they tend to like polarize their views even further than they used to before they found their like group that was with them. And the constant division amongst groups can, of course, again, lead to even more anger and fear. So it's kind of like this really interesting feedback loop that's occurring on our social media that's increasing the likelihood of anger and fear. As far as spirituality goes, anger and fear can not only affect our mental and physical health, but it can sever our spiritual connections as well. And this is this doesn't matter what spiritual tradition you follow, this is worldwide. The emotions are associated with, I guess you would say, things that are considered barriers to concepts like enlightenment, compassion, divine communication. Fear specifically shrinks your sense of possibilities. When you're afraid, you don't think things are as possible as you did before you were afraid. And anger basically narrows your focus to things that are, it takes your focus away from things that are pro-social and focuses them on things that are like self-justification and retribution and revenge and things that are not exactly considered, enlightened, regardless of what spiritual path you're going down. And from a neurological sense, the prefrontal cortex, and this is kind of what Marlene was talking about, the prefrontal cortex can actually be completely rewired by anger and fear to not only seek out more anger and fear, but notice more anger and fear, become hyper aware of anger and fear, see things that make you angry and afraid, even when they're not necessarily there. And unfortunately, that is the same area of our brain that is responsible for empathy and higher levels of reasoning and the things that we really value in our spiritual lives. And so I kind of came up with a few suggestions here on how we can work to decrease anger and fear in our lives and how we can work with dealing with individuals who are angry or afraid. And one of the biggest ones I came up with has actually been covered quite a bit is it was offering connections, that whole sense of community, the community engagement, because isolation does amplify fear and anger. Building supportive communities like this one, whether in spiritual groups, volunteer work, social organizations, any of these kind of pro-social groups and communities really tend to counteract the emotions of being afraid. Also, any kind of mindful work is really beneficial to like short circuit that fight or flight response and try to return your brain to kind of a sense of reasoning. Anything from meditation to yoga to Reiki work, anything that's really going to like just try to calm that primal part of your brain back down and get you out of that dopamine hit, get you out of that like non-reasoning brain part where you can actually start to think rationally again, can really help. So when you're dealing with others who are angry, it's really important that you don't become angry back, that you model that calmness, that if they're yelling at you, you keep them, an even tone as much as you can. It has been shown in research that your calm behavior can result in someone else being calm. I can tell you just by being a high school teacher, if you're getting yelled at by a parent, you just talk quieter. And then that parent will automatically start toning it down. You really kind of try to promote problem solving over blaming. That's a really big one. So a big group getting together and sitting down and just talking about who to blame and who's at fault for this is absolutely useless. It's going to do nothing but promote fear and anger. Rather, we should focus those groups and try to come up with problem solving. And of course, I used to be a therapist, so I also have to throw, psychotherapy in there. Cognitive behavioral therapy is amazing anger management tools. I tell my students all the time, especially my psychology students, even psychologists need psychiatry, you need therapy. Even therapists have to have a therapist. And so highly recommend that, because not only can you get treatment for the anger management or the fear management, we can also look for any underlying issues such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, anything that might be triggering that you're not aware of. And that's kind of all I have. Just one of those things where, you know, to quote Rebecca in the whole understanding fights fear that she likes in, it's kind of like just letting you guys know that if you kind of know what's going on chemically in your brain, it really might not be you personally. It really just might be these weird chemicals floating in your brain that's causing that response, but then you can rationally work to get over that. And that's
Thank you
all I
so
have.
much, Ashley. Thank you so much, because I think
I was
that
nervous.
you did so good. I feel like it's such an important topic because a lot of people have family members they've lost to anger, especially over the past, I don't even know how many years now. What, where are we at? And it's just, I'm trying myself to just look at those people with compassion because they're sick. They have an issue, that they have an addiction, and it is unfortunately not something that is something you could take away from them, like drugs or something. It is something in here, and it's very hard to reach people that are in that kind of spiral.
And we're seeing it everywhere. Like even in the classrooms, we're seeing kids that when we take away their phones so that they can't get online and get those hits by finding that thing that's going on in drama in their life that would make them angry or make them afraid, or because I work with teenagers, you know, like whatever drama is going on right now. If we take away their phones and stuff, they have basic withdrawal symptoms because they can't get in there and get into whatever fight or flight situation that they need that extra hit for.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Ashley. Okay, so up next we have Angela Rose. And Angela is a mental health first aid instructor and mental health action day director. I think I said that right.
You nailed it. Thank you, Krista. And I want to say first, Krista, thank you for hosting this and bringing us all together today. This has been so incredible so far. And thank you to everybody who is here right now in this moment and watching or listening later, because you can spend your time doing anything and you're choosing to spend that with us here right now. And I think that's pretty special. So thank you. I'm going to do a little bit of rapid fire. Let me start my timer because I just want to share a bunch of tools with you all. My background is in mental health, but from a peer-to-peer perspective mostly. And so I have been lucky enough to be on the team that launched what we hope will become the Stop, Drop, and Roll of mental health. So we launched this with MTV and the nonprofit Active Minds. And the Stop, Drop, and Roll of mental health is called ASK, which stands for Acknowledge, Support, and Keep in Touch. And so you can go to asktohelp.com, and it's actually an interactive YouTube video. And so you go through this YouTube video and you get to, it's like a choose your own adventure where you get to help Charlie have a conversation with Luna, who's having a hard day at a coffee shop. And we realized it's like there was no easy way to practice these kinds of conversations when you're having a conversation with a friend who's maybe going through a hard time. And so you get to choose how Charlie interacts with Luna, and there's little learnings along the way. And I will say there are some more helpful responses than others. And so you might get kicked back, and that's okay. That's what the learning environment is for. So I encourage everyone to go to asktohelp.com if you want to hopefully be a good friend and kind of learn how to have these conversations when someone is having a difficult time. Now, the next program I love, which is called Mental Health First Aid. And so I didn't know this program existed until I got certified in it, but it's basically like a first aid, but for mental health. And so at the very core level of it is we teach you how to properly assess for potential mental unwellness. And then how do you properly approach someone? How do you properly recognize the signs and symptoms of a potential mental unwellness? And then how do you properly de-escalate from a potential crisis? But then also, how do you properly escalate to a professional? And so it is a full day program, but it is all accredited by the National Council of Mental Wellbeing. And once you get that certification, you are a certified mental health first aider for 3 years. So I have found the program to be incredibly helpful because even though I have always had the best intentions and I have wanted to help my friends, having gone through that training, I realized after that there were certain ways that I was approaching conversations that were actually more unhelpful than I anticipated. And so I just find it to be a really good tactical toolkit for you to help your friends, peers, coworkers, children, family members, like whoever might be in your circle, to support them in a healthy and productive way. I will also say, though, if you choose to get that certification, you're never required to use it. So it's not like you're an obligatory Batman, right? Or you're walking around where you have to go fight the good fight. It's like throughout the whole program, we talk about how important it is to recognize your own capacity and your bandwidth, because if you are not in a place to have some of these hard conversations, then it could potentially become very unhelpful for both you and or them. So just keep that in mind. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also love that this summit today has become very sciencey. I love science. I'm a science nerd. So I'm actually going to take that lead and talk a little bit about the brain too, because I also like to I like to talk about mental health also as brain care and mental wellness, because our brain is like this cute little pet that thinks it's in charge, right? And it will sometimes try to take the lead, but it does need to be managed. And I don't know about any of you, but sometimes my brain can be kind of a jerk, right? And it's like sometimes you can get some of that negative self-talk, you can get some of that imposter syndrome, and then you're like start to feel bad about yourself. But think about too, you wouldn't let a friend talk to you the way that your brain talks to you sometimes. Not cool, brain. And so, like, I'll share too. Some of you may have heard this story before, but when I first was told, oh, you should start meditating, which please don't should on people, but like, oh, you should meditate. So then I tried to meditate, and I found it to be so stressful, because when I tried to quiet my brain, of course, I gave space to even more negative self-talk. And so I just found it incredibly unhelpful for me. Now, I have continued that practice, and I've actually gone back to it, but it's something I stopped recommending to folks until I kind of know them a little bit better, because it's just not a blanket fix-it-all. And that actually might not be a good thing for somebody to dive right into. And so just being really aware, and also always discern for yourself, like what is the right potential tool for somebody. Also, sometimes people don't want advice and they just want reassurance and information, right? Like, I think we're in a culture where we're so quick to provide advice and provide like a solution. And sometimes the best thing you can say is like, yeah, that sucks. Full stop. That might be all someone needs to hear to be seen and validated. It's like, yeah, it does suck. You know what I mean? And so like holding that space for folks and letting them kind of help you. But going back quickly to the brain, because my gosh, time flies. Also take a good look at your morning routine. Like how you start your day can truly like set you up for the rest of the day. And now I used to be like this. I used to be someone that like as soon as I woke up, I would turn around and grab my phone. Right. But now they've done some of the science research on it. And what's happening is that when you do that, you're actually jumpstarting your brain from like the theta alpha waves all the way up. And so you're basically setting your brain up to be in dopamine seeking mode for the rest of the day. And then with that also, like what happens when you look at your phone, one of the first things you see is something bad in the news. Shocking. Like how often do you see something bad in the news? Right. So then now that can also set you off in a tailspin for the rest of the day. So consider an alternative way to wake your brain up. What I like to do, and I'm trying to get back into the practice, is waking up and then doing morning pages. Right. So just 3 pages of stream of consciousness when I'm in that theta state, just waking up, just write. And it's a really beautiful way to understand where your thoughts and brain is at, but then also you're not kind of jumpstarting your brain into dopamine seeking mode right away. That's it. I'll end with 2 more. Self-care. Like self-care is not selfish. And I love what Rebecca said about self-love, but self-care is really important. But also self-care isn't all breath work and happy hours. Sometimes self-care is cleaning the toilet. Sometimes self-care is making that phone call that you've been really dreading and you don't want to do, and it's not going to feel good in the moment that you're doing it, but your future self is going to be so relieved that you did. So that is also part of that self-care. And then just a fun one that I'm going to throw in, and also look at your phone and your notifications. There's a great article that I can share later. And then to tie this back to spirituality is like, because sometimes I'm like too human. I'm so human that I forget I have like spiritual tools. And this is a tip that I found from someone on Instagram, Selena Rosso. She's great. But she's like, if you need a break, go take a walk outside and talk to your spirit guides, but like talk out loud to them. And like, but if you are in a place where like, I can't just go walk around the seats talking to myself, people are going to think I'm like woo-woo. Like, put your headphones in. No one's going to know that you're not talking to somebody on the phone. Right? No one's gonna know, right? And so that can be a good way to build your connection with your spirit guides too. Is like you're out, you're walking, you're talking. So I will end there. Thank you all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Angela. And if anybody is interested in being certified in the mental health first aid, follow my group, because I'm thinking that soon Angela and I are gonna be doing something there. We just have to get enough people. So I think it's 10. Do we have to have 10 people? Or is it
Actually minimum 5. So
five?
just a minimum of 5, maximum
Okay.
of 30. So I think we can do it.
Okay. Okay, so at least 5 people will need to sign up for that. So just stay tuned on my group, and we're gonna do it, because we got to do it. But here you go. Okay, so up next, we actually have finished up with all of our speakers, but last, we're going to have a community member speak on her experience finding a community and what that's done for her. So, Sophie, you're up next.
Hi. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not an expert on any of this, but I have my story to offer. So
And we're happy to have you here. So thank you for volunteering.
I have pretty much seen the world differently than most people my whole life. I've had an extremely hard time fitting in anywhere as a result. So when I was 16 years old and I found spiritual mentors who actually listened to my thoughts and ideas, showed me respect and cared about me, I was absolutely over the moon. I was elated that I had finally found a place I fit in, and that I would finally have like-minded community to support me and help me grow in my newfound religion. Aside from that, my new spiritual teachers were also very level-headed and convinced me to go deeper on my mental health journey, as they were worried about my current mental state at the time, which was frankly quite bleak. I was not well. So I did. I attended weekly therapy as well as weekly witchcraft lessons from these people. And I thrived. I began growing. My mentor's level-headed approach to the spiritual world also helped me stay grounded in what beliefs aligned with me and what didn't. I was really excited about the new world that had opened up in front of me, and I went looking for more spiritually aligned friends. Unfortunately, I soon learned that not everyone was as welcoming and kind as my newfound witchy family, and sadly, many of the people I met along my path were incredibly toxic. They had jumped into witchcraft, paganism, and New Age spirituality without ever addressing their traumas or deconstructing from their previous religions. It became clear that the spirituality to them was the answer to everything, and they felt no need for personal introspection. Many of the people who I was coming into contact with believed they were on a higher level than me. And so as a result, they would bully me. They would harass me and heckle me for the way that I did things. So I withdrew. I withdrew from that community entirely. I practiced on my own, along with the very small group of friends that I had connected with. But unfortunately, a few years later, the main mentor of the two passed away suddenly. And his wife, who was my other advisor, withdrew. She has actually never fully recovered from that, and she pushed us all away. So then I was left entirely without a spiritual community. And I just lived my life and went on. I went to therapy and took care of my other needs, but I didn't grow spiritually at all at that point because I didn't have an aligned place to do it. Then a few years later, actually a few decades later, enters TikTok. And I did stay far away from witch talk initially due to the aforementioned reasons, which if you've ever been on TikTok is actually a really good idea. But eventually the algorithm picked up on who I was and started showing me psychics. I'm quick to dismiss people, or I was back then, I am not anymore, quick to dismiss people who are psychic, who claim to be psychic, but these psychics were telling everyone that everyone was psychic. It wasn't just them. You didn't have to come to them for help, and they could help you grow your abilities. I couldn't afford the classes they had, but I did start working on it. I started doing everything I could to strengthen my abilities on my own. And eventually I was able to book a consultation with Rebecca the Ghost Guide. After talking to Rebecca and receiving some very helpful advice from her, I realized I was going to require the assistance of others if I wanted to go any further. I'd already been taking her classes through Patreon, but I was only getting so far in my development on my own. So I knew she ran an online spiritual community, as did a couple of her colleagues. So with the hope that there would be even more spiritually grounded people in these groups, I went all in and joined what are technically 3 separate communities, even though they all contain basically the same people. In these communities, I finally found my solace. Everyone has been so warming and welcoming. They're more than happy to help and answer any questions I have. They didn't get carried away by like flights of fancy about all the woo-woo stuff they encountered, and they take a very logical approach to it all. They check in with each other, they listen and offer help when it's appropriate. They're gentle with one another. It's a stark contrast to what I had previously experienced in other spiritual spaces. It was everything that I could have possibly dreamed of and more. I have finally found the spiritual community that I was looking for, and it only took me 30 years. With their help and encouragement, I've discovered that I actually do have most of the clairsenses naturally. They were just muted. They've also helped me work through how to unmute them. For example, I now trust in myself to decipher the difference between my claircognizance telling me something that's actually wrong and what is just my anxiety acting up. I've learned how to properly check in with myself, and I cannot stress to you enough how important that skill alone is when working with your psychic abilities. I've struggled with my mental health for my entire life. And I truly believe that the thing that kept me from getting caught up in the spiritual psychosis that I have seen so many others fall into is all of the therapy and personal shadow work that I've employed over the years. Having a supported, like-minded community where we are all treated like equals has been so essential to not only growing my psychic skills, but also my self-esteem, in that they have helped me believe in myself. I now know that I am psychic, and I know exactly what it looks like for me thanks to the encouragement and support of these very gifted people whom I have chosen to surround myself with. Several of the people who are in this collective community are here today, and to all of you, as well as all of those who couldn't make it, I send you my endless gratitude. You've given me so much that I can never fully repay you for. With your guidance and support, you've filled the empty spaces in my spiritual being that decades of traditional therapy could not do alone. Thank you. 1,000 times thank you. I would not be where I am now if it were not for you.
Well, damn. Okay, anyways, that was beautiful. It has been an absolute joy to see your energy change over the past several, like, I think it's been a year at least. And that's just that's one story from one person. I think that there's a lot of members of the several groups that we have and a lot of people are in the same places, but it is kind of sad, and it's also kind of heartwarming that we're doing this today. because if it wasn't for TikTok, we would not all be here right now. And it's unfortunate, and we don't know what the future is going to hold, but at least we found each other. And if we find anybody else that is struggling out in the wild, this can be a tool. Say, okay, go watch this. Go watch this little summit on this website, or I think it'll probably be on YouTube at some point on many different platforms. But thank you so much for sharing. And here's your applause. Okay, so next is questions. So anybody have any questions? Wait, Caitlin, did you see any questions from the chat that were kind of there? I haven't been able to see the chat at all. So
it's so good. There's one question from Jess for Marlene about where did it go? I had it. Oh my goodness. Oh, it's from Melissa. My bad. I'm sorry. It's from Melissa, and the question was, is in parentheses gene expression and trauma's effect on the body heading in the direction that we can actually see generational trauma being passed on scientifically?
The answer is yes and no. The field is called epigenetics. And there I saw the question in chat, and I was like, let me see where we're at with the science. So there's actually an article that was published just in December. I think it was December. Yes. And it was on a health publication here. So they're still looking at the science of it. There's things they're looking at in animal studies. There's some argument back and forth about the science of it, because there's always argument about science. But yes, in rat and animal studies, they're seeing what seems to be very clearly the changes in offspring through trauma exposures or exposure to limited access to resources and those kinds of things. The 2015, they did a study on Holocaust survivors and intergenerational impacts of that. The sample size was small, so there's some people who kind of criticize it, but yes. There's also, in that same vein, there's evidence about when we talk about herbal remedies, where your genetics come from, so which part of the world and which types of herbs and remedies work for you. So if you are from a location where this native herb is from, it's more likely to be beneficial for you than something from another part of the world, which I think is super fascinating. So when you think about herbal remedies and cures, kind of be aware of where those are coming from, and then where do your genetics come from. So I don't know if that answers your question. I hope so.
I'm going to go with yes. Were there any other questions? Nope. All right. All right. Would anybody else like to say any last words?
Actually, never mind. Lillian just put two lovely questions in the chat.
Oh, okay, Lillian. Go on.
Sorry. Lillian's first question is, in regards to limiting phone use in the morning, does shutting off your alarm count towards rushing you through the different frequency waves? From anyone who may have any offer.
Yeah, I would love to hear from others, but I would say no. Shutting off your alarm is just more like an action versus scrolling on social media. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It basically depends on how you shut off your alarm.
Yeah.
If you just shut it off by simply, hitting the button and shutting it off, that's one thing. But if you shut it off by turning it over and hitting the Facebook button or something and opening that up, just out of habit, then that's a big issue. One of the things I do have is, let's see if I can grab one, is one of these instead of trying to use my phone. And what this does is it slowly lights up my room to symbolize, because I'm a teacher, so I have to get up before the sun. But it basically makes your room simulate sunrise at whatever time you say. And then it will actually wake you up by playing your sounds of choice, whether it's more active outdoor noises like birds chirping louder and louder, that sort of thing. And so in a lot of the research I've done, having simulated light actually seems to work better, and using an alarm like this instead of your phone.
That's the exact alarm I have. Yeah, I love that thing.
I love that. And then also for any of y'all, Lillian's second question is, and I can also second this question because I'm also curious what you all have to say about it. Any advice for someone with ADHD or anyone, I'm going to add for myself, anyone who's neurospicy, where the whole shtick is dopamine hits, kind of like how we would get our dopamine hits without having to use kind of like our phones or anything of that sort, if that's kind of the same aligned question. I kind of combine the two, but yeah.
The standoff.
Oh, was that for me?
Go ahead.
Okay. I would highly recommend slowing down. Be intentionally slow at some point during your day. If that means walking slowly, if that means reading instead of like even listening to an audiobook, even though audiobook can be a form of being slower, etc. Be intentionally slow about something in your day. We are being taught as a society to have ADHD features where it's like, well, you should be able to do this, that, and the other all at the same time, all at once, and then still be productive and go, 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 go. We are in a society that is being taught to move faster than ever before in human history, and it is stressing us out. So anything that we can do to feed the natural evolution of the reality that we are not meant to know everything all at once. We are not meant to be going so quickly. We are not meant to even be able to get in a plane and just like go to a different continent all in one day. Now we can do these things. Humans are incredible creatures, though we still need to maintain that we have evolved to be slower. So anything to do that can allow you to be slower, to be more in your present, that has an effect, and it can retrain your brain and retrain your spirit to appreciate the very basic things that are in front of us all the time that we forget about.
I love that answer. Marlene, I think, was next to answer.
Sorry, I was waiting for other people to answer that question. So I have a short list of things that you can do that aren't screen time for dopamine hits. I'm also neurospicy. I'm going to give you the whole list so you can decide what works for you. Physical exercise is supposed to be really great for bringing that out. Creative activities, this is something I really like to do. So create something, whether it's a tiny piece of art or you draw on your hand. Yeah, crochet something. It doesn't have to be something meaningful or useful, which is one of the things I struggle with, is I feel like everything I make has to be for a purpose, but it doesn't have to be that way. Just create something for the sake of creating. We've already talked about mindfulness and meditation. That's another way you can kind of increase your dopamine levels. Social interaction is one of my favorite ways to do that. So engaging with people in like real time or texting, if you will, but trying to just engage with people. Being outside in nature is another one. I just like to go just stand outside, and that makes me really feel really good. Or I'll just go sit outside if I don't have the energy to do something else. Music is also another one that you can use. I use music to regulate a lot. I also use it for my meditations or when I'm doing energy work. It helps me hit whatever I need to hit with music. The last couple of things are just like basic. You're a human, to take care of yourself, like getting sleep and eating right. Like you should just treat yourself like a real human. And I also want to add something to what Rebecca said. People are always talking about multitasking and all of this. There's actually no such thing as multitasking. What we're doing is microtasking. So our brain is actually shifting just really quickly between a bunch of different tasks. Which messes up our attention spans. So just like keep that in mind when you see someone doing like 10 things at once. They're actually just dividing their attention into tiny little snippets and then quickly, rapidly switching between them. And no one should have to do that. So I'm going to shut up now.
We love listening to you. Ashley was next.
Oh, darn it. I forgot I had my hand up. Marlene, like, nailed that thing. So yeah, I had jumped in about the same time she did. She basically covered all of it. It's really just remembering that dopamine has everything to do with what you find pleasurable. And so it's really just finding what you find pleasurable, which could be, any of the stuff you listed. I mean, any of it, just depending, your dating life can also fall into that. Like any way you really want to look into this, it's just finding what you find pleasurable. Because when you find pleasure, you're going to get that dopamine rate. That's all I had.
And I love that. And then Katie.
As per usual, all of my fellow science nerds have nailed it all. I will say a majority of my clients, and actually a bulk of them today that I saw, were all women with a diagnosis of ADHD. And I feel like I get so jazzed when so many women are a part of this research now, because I got my teaching degree back in the dark ages, and so many of the boys were diagnosed with it, but they had just put the stigma on young girls that we were already busybodies and already multitasking and already paying attention to so many things that ADHD couldn't possibly exist in women. So I'm actually super excited. So without saying the dopamine answer, I just will say task management is one thing that I just finished with a client before this call. Because many things that can manifest as ADHD or our neurospiciness is also, which flings you full circle for this entire thing, is trauma that manifests and looks like ADHD responses and everything that we've already talked about. But I will also say delegation. A lot of women that I see are also moms or care for anything, plants, animals, and they just feel such a sense of overwhelming, which also can manifest with the racing thoughts, of which I call the freight train thoughts with ADHD clients, because it's never a highway, it's a full stop. Like if you've ever seen the Polar Express, what it takes to stop that train on that ice is what it feels like with freight train thoughts. And so don't ever diminish them either. So if you're somebody who is trying to advocate for your own thought process like that and setting those boundaries, just really advocating. I just saw D&D in the chat. I am also an avid D&Der, so that also helps. No screens needed, just your fantasy. Speaking of ADHD and distraction, I just saw that pop up. But yes, I would just say also delegation, and lists if you feel like something is interfering also with that ability, because I feel like we often forget about what active meditations look like, whether that be Tai Chi or any sort of yoga movement. But I also myself am not somebody who can sit in complete silence. So just make lists for yourself and delegate, ladies and gents. And then however you identify.
Thank you.
Oh, I love these words.
Yes. These words
are
that
great
you all say, they're wonderful.
They are. Are there any more questions that you see?
Speaking now, I don't see any though. But
Okay. Well, as of right now, we are at about an hour and a half in. So I think that this is a great spot for us to wrap it up. I thank everyone for being here today. I do not think this is going to be the one and only. I think this is definitely going to happen again at some point. So just keep following the people you follow and look out for another round in the future. Who knows when, but it'll happen. And to wrap it all up, everybody gets a round of applause.